Hello and welcome to Old Ways Gardening and Prepping. My name is Teresa. I'd like to welcome you on my monthly adventure to the Memphis Herb Society meeting. This time, Junior's going along as well. It's supposed to be a really good meeting tonight, so better get off of here and start heading inside. I'll see y'all inside. Beautiful entrance to the Memphis Botanic Garden, and apparently I didn't know they held Memphis in May this year. Ghana was the chosen country for Memphis in May. Look at all the beautiful plants and the beautiful shamrocks, or also known as oxalis. Beautiful, beautiful. Let's go over here. I see some surprise lilies. Beautiful aloe veras. Beautiful surprise lilies up. A little early, but still beautiful. Solomon seal, variegated Solomon seal. Okay, time to head in. Beautiful plants for sale. Little baby calla lilies. Anthuriums. I just love anthuriums. Oh, they've changed the artwork again. I see they got the fountain and everything back to working. Oh, beautiful hydrangea picture. Beautiful artwork. Oh, great blue heron above. Oh, ahead. Dog got him in a tight spot. Beautiful artwork. Oh, a life mandala. That's pretty. Okay, time to head in.
Hello? Microphone's not working. I'm very loud. She needs your attention.
Good job, Carol. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is tell a very special lady happy birthday, Miss Mary Helen. She's trying to sneak out. The treasurer reports is a newsletter. If you'd like to look at it, it's on our website. We'll be choosing board members for 2023. So if anybody would like to participate with us, let me know, or Kathy James, or Anita Lotz. Let one of us know, and we'd be glad to talk to you. There's Anita.
There's Kathy.
We have one event left this year, and it's the silent auction. Again, contact me if you want to help with that. We need help with pretty much everything this year. Did you have something? I want to read a portion of this letter that we got from the Botanic Garden. It is from Mary Helen in regards to the herb garden and the new tags. And it says, "Thank you for all the generous funding you provided to redo the labels in the herb garden. Having correct botanical names to go with all the plants in our collection is going to make a tremendous difference in our visitor experience. Your continued support through the years means so much to our staff. We are all excited as we enter the new fiscal year and have dubbed it as the Year of Horticulture. This donation supports just one of several projects and enhancements throughout the grounds that will further our educational mission. Thank you again for continuing to support the garden, giving Memphis a place of beauty for all generations to enjoy and connect with nature. And this is a good example of your membership dues at work. Suzanne, if anybody has any...
Ginger, next month's meeting, tell everybody about next month's meeting. Our August meeting.
Okay. Yes.
Our next, in August, our meeting will be in this place, and we're going to have as our speaker Rick Pudwell, whom nobody in here knows. And I have asked him to do a retrospective of his years in horticulture.
Yay!
I think he's working on it.
Suzanne's going to introduce our speaker.
Also, know I've got Mary Helen as the assistant director here. Thank goodness she's here for the meeting tonight.
My voice goes
Well, hello, everyone. It's good to see all of you. It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Carol Reese. I have to say that Carol is a rock star in the gardening world. Her many accomplishments include she's a nationally known speaker. She wrote a weekly column on gardening and nature for the Jackson Sun for 20 years. And early on, she had a radio show with Plato Tullianis. TV, all right. And just last year, she retired from UT Extension Office after serving, and I didn't have it so many years, so 26 years as an Extension horticulture specialist. Carol knows gardening, plants, and has her own original perspective. It seems she's not completely retired though, since and has many more things, gardening information to share with us and to keep us all thinking. Carol Reese.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Everybody got their phones off? I have to always remember to turn mine off too. Can everybody hear me? I am loud, but if I get quiet, tell me. Raise your hand. Do something. Thank you all for coming tonight. And yes, who remembers Plato? Who remembers Gene Anthony? You know, we lost Gene this year, by the way, and thanks to all of you. I know some of you contributed toward her horse. Had to find a rescue. Her horse Dolly was 30 years old and had never had a halter on her. And we found some kind people at Redemption Road Rescue who took her in. And I know some of you contributed towards her upkeep there. And Dolly is still kicking. Doll Baby is actually her full name. So thank you. Gene Anthony, by the way, for those of you who don't know, was one of the original founding members of the Herb Society here. Had a great little herb farm and a big herb festival out in Covington, where I made friends with many of you for the first time. I get a little choked up to think about it. Fabulous little woman. Anyway, we're going to talk tonight about the native plant facts and fallacies. I'll admit this is a rant. I got a little bit fired up about this idea that it has to be native. How many of y'all feel you've been plant shamed? Something that was not native. Well, I feel like probably there are if any, very few native purists in here. So mainly what I guess I'm going to do is help arm you with some facts that will help you feel less shamed, okay? And we'll go through this pretty quickly because I have a lot of slides and I talk very fast. Don't be afraid to ask me to repeat something. Uh-oh, there we go already. Something. Which way do it go here, Carolyn?
That's the right click.
I'm doing it right. I've never spoken at the Memphis Botanic Garden without technical issues. Ever. I guess I can do it from here. It was working. It was. I saw it. All right. Let me just say. All right. We know, everybody's heard, natives are better, right? You gotta be doing natives. Natives are easier, drought tolerant, blah, blah, blah. We can test some of this stuff.
Yes.
The scary part about all this is that they're passing laws in many places that it has to be native. Y'all know this, right? Because they're ripping out exotics that wildlife is already adapted to at great expense. So we've got to really fight back about this because it sounds logical if you hear it. It sounds logical. Native plants, that native insects need native plants, and without insects we have no birds and on the food chain. It sounds very logical. And some of that is true, but the details are not. So we will launch from there. The native plant controversies, this is going on. I think I already said that. So. The caveats. I'm not talking to those of you who just want to plant natives because you like a sense of place. I have tons of natives in my yard. I'm not anti-native, which, by the way, I've been told we can't have Carol Reese. She hates natives. And people won't come. I was called a right-wing inflammatory who hates native plants. And that, I'm very different than that. I try to find good things about getting old. I was a wild young thing, you know. And I still think of myself as pretty much a, tough woman. Strong and can take care of business. And I still think I am. But it's still a struggle a little bit to realize I'm not quite the person I used to be. But this is something I do admit I love about my mind. I'm happier than I've ever been. It's just that the dead body fails, right? So we're having to learn to deal with that a little bit. There are a lot of things I've learned as I've gotten older, and that is context matters. That a lot of times I was so sure were true. They were true from my perspective, but not from someone else. So we're going to dig into that. And that really we have a lot of myths that get perpetuated out there, and if it gets said long enough, people believe they're true. So we have to really kind of think about how we do the research and learn how to do critical thinking. So here's the things I hear a lot. Native plants are hard to find in garden centers. Natives are better adapted and more drought resistant. Cultivars aren't useful to wildlife. Native insects need native plants. Lawns are bad for wildlife. Native plants are those that occur naturally in a particular region without human introduction. We're going to test all of these. Oh, thank you. Good. I just pointed. There I am. I love all wild things. I think of dogs as wild things, right? Because they're descendants of the wolf. A lot of you know that I built a place out in the country where dogs can be descendants of the wolf. They can roll in whatever smelly thing they want to. They can howl at the moon. We go swimming. They can chase and kill varmints. That's what they're for. So I have 15 of them, y'all. That's what I do a lot of adopting out. They're not, everybody's fixed. These are old dogs with medical needs or were too timid. In fact, I had 18 dogs Friday, down to 15 again on Saturday, back up to 17 the next day, and now I'm up to 16. Because I'm always taking in dogs, finding either that they belong to somebody or taking care of their medical needs or getting them to a good rescue, okay? I'm not a crazy nut. I'm not a dog hoarder. I don't want 15 dogs. I don't. But I have dogs, 15 dogs that can't be adopted out. All right. I'm for plants that provide benefits in today's disturbed ecosystem. But we're in trouble, aren't we? We really and truly are. And if this summer wasn't evidence, I don't know what is. The world's on fire around us. How many of y'all have noticed the lack of insects and how many fewer insects we have these days? So we need all this stuff. We've got to plant what works, no matter where it came from. This book came out and a lot of people jumped on this bandwagon, and the mission is great. We should certainly be filling our yards with plants that support wildlife, with plants that support insects. We have got to be doing that. Does it have to be native? It most certainly does not. But that is the message that somehow has gotten out there. And so that is what is happening, is that people are saying it has to be. We're going to take this down. And this is what Doug Callamy's premise is, and it's very true. We have to have foliage for insects to eat, especially he's real big on caterpillars, the lepidopteran caterpillars, which are useful to the birds that are raising their young. They're not the only thing, but certainly they are an important part of that nesting stage. Go ahead. And we all want to do the right thing, so we all said, okay, well, it's got to be native to save these critters, and we'll go native, right? But is it the right thing? The native plant poster child is the monarch. Man, if you're not planting native milkweeds for the monarch, You're just an evil human being. It's the devil's spawn. And of course, we all do want to help this monarch caterpillar. I mean, the monarch butterfly and the caterpillars. This was one of the poster child that he would choose to say it has to be native. Yet here I have a picture of a caterpillar eating what's called balloon plant in some circles, family jewels plant. It's a milkweed from Africa, Gomphocarpus physocarpus. Guess what, people? Africa has milkweed butterflies, and Africa has milkweeds. It's the chemistry in the milkweeds that's important. We'll dig into that more deeply here in just a moment. So when I knew this, that we grew these plants that were not native in our own yards and at the experiment station where I worked for 26 years, where we had display gardens, and I saw so many monarch caterpillars successfully raised on non-native milkweeds, and that the native milkweeds, in fact, that we planted struggled and had a lot of issues and were difficult to grow and were quite expensive. Then I began to think to myself, by golly, to help the monarchs, I need to plant these non-natives more so, and it can be cheaply and easily grown. And if insects have to have native plants, why do we have so many dadgum entomologists finding insects on our crops? Because guess what, people? None of our crops are native, except for blueberries. That's the only important crop that we have. And so all these people who have careers in entomology fighting groups are apparently not informed. All right, context. You know this old fable, right? It's a very important thing to think about. 6 blind men were filling an elephant. The one who felt the rope felt the tail said it's a rope. The one filling the leg said it was a trunk. The one filling the ear said it's a fan. Were any of them wrong? No, they just did not have the big picture. They had to look at the whole context to know what truly is an elephant. So a lot of the ways we can use context, just a couple of examples. When I was a child, I hated it when the wolf would catch the deer or the lion would catch the gazelle. Now that I know how important predators are and that poor predator mom has little puppies at home that need to be fed, and I'm all about get them, kitchen, at home with the dogs are like, it's a rabbit! Everybody go get the rabbit, because of course the rabbits are eating my vegetables in my garden. But this is the way it's supposed to happen. So context is, at one point I was on the side of the prey. Now I'm actually on the side of the predator, especially since predators are so lacking in today's ecosystems. In today's context, most of us have come around to thinking honeybees are a good addition, right? They are European insects that were brought over here on ships. Imagine needing honeybees so much that you packed them up and brought them over on a ship that sailed across the ocean for weeks and weeks. And guess what, y'all? It wasn't for the honey and it wasn't for the pollination. What was it for? Wax, the beeswax. The candles were so important back then. And you left your hives, actually, to your descendants. That's how important the honeybees were. Of course, they began to spread. It's a non-native insect. It's an invasive insect that took over our continent. And the Native American would say, wherever the white man's flies go, the white man is sure to follow. It was a sign that bad things were to come. Well, now in today's disturbed ecosystem where we farm in ways that are not really good for our planet, we have to have honeybees. There's something wrong with a planet that packs honeybees up onto trucks in the night and drives them around to release them into monoculture farms, right? We're not doing something right there, but it's at this point considered necessary. All this is context. When we say that about plants, we get a lot of flack about Buddleia. The first time I ever heard about Doug Calamity, somebody had sent me an email about what an evil person I was to recommend something that was so invasive, and that Doug Calamity said if you're going to plant Buddleia, you might as well just asphalt over your entire yard. And I said, really? I mean, it does flower all season. I see butterflies, and I see bees, and I see hummingbirds, and all sorts of good pollinators on it. Are you serious? Well, then it turns out because nothing will eat the foliage, is what he said. But guess what? A lot of native plants have foliage that is not edible by insects, and they don't bloom all summer. So if this is a plant that is so invasive, and it is, I mean, it can reseed in certain places. I don't see it a whole lot around here, occasionally. But the way it got that reputation, y'all, when London was bombed, Buddleia grew in the rubble, in the concrete rubble of the ruins in the heat. Now, I'm asking you right now, when we have Pacific Northwest temperatures of 118 degrees, When our urban heat islands are so scorching hot, when British Columbia had a high temperature last year of 121, shouldn't we plant anything that'll grow in an urban heat island? Because what's more important, whether that ugly is spreading around or that our earth is burning up? So I'm saying don't limit my plant selections. When I need the fire hose, don't hand me a little wimpy hose that says it has to be this, because this is what we need. Okay, I'll just talk a little bit about me challenging somebody as all-powerful as Doug Calla. Who am I? I'm a little country girl from Mississippi. I grew up on a dairy farm. I don't know much, but I did get an education, and I did wander around all my life, ever since I was little. My mama turned me loose on the farm and said, as long as you can find your way home, you're free. And I did, and I rode horses every day, and I looked at things, and I brought stuff home, and I read about them, and I found out so much from using my own eyes. Now, I'm not saying that I don't value my education, because I do. And so what I want to do is say that what I see is good about the native plant movement is that it does celebrate wildlife gardening, because who doesn't love a butterfly? Which I kind of resent. Y'all know why, right? Why do we garden for butterflies?
So they pollinate.
Well, that's one reason, but why butterflies? Why not a beagle? They're pretty. I never got elected to homecoming or cheerleading. Anybody out here gardening for ugly pollinators. But I am proud that we're celebrating wildlife, but it's a good part of the native plant movement, and I'm happy about it. There I am. There they are. Seriously, bottom glasses and great. And good people. We get good people attracted to good causes, and I love that. I always tell my nephews, because they're talking about no good women, they don't meet good women, I said, join a good cause. There aren't many men at all in the dog rescue business. There's lots of women involved. You know, if you're going looking for them in bars, it's probably not where you're going to find your best women. Party circle. So let's go look. The native plant movement does celebrate weeds, and I do too. Y'all know I do a whole talk called For Love of Weeds. I think part of the problem isn't so much what we plant, it's that we clean up too much. Mm-hmm. Somebody moves to the country, they clean up their farm, they spray their fence rows, and go, what happened to the wildlife? Mm-hmm. We need weeds. We just need to learn how to tolerate weeds or even enjoy weeds. And you could sculpt a pasture of weeds with some beautiful mowed lines. And also it's like, voila, it's a landscape. So we can learn to celebrate weeds, and that's a really good thing.
Carol?
Oh.
Like, I know how you're saying, you like the weeds and stuff, like dandelions are weeds, use them all the time. Creeping Charlie is a weed, you can use that in the teas, right?
Yes.
So,
And I'm going to talk about dandelion in just a minute. And I really appreciate what you're saying, and I want to hear all about it later.
Yeah.
But if we all keep talking during the talk, I won't get through, and I've made too long a talk. I gotta go back. It's my fault. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. All right, come back story of a weed. In my lifetime, growing up on a dairy farm in Mississippi, the county agents taught us how to get rid of this terrible broom sedge, right? Pasture weed. And we're like, oh wait, where did the quail go? Because that's where quail live. If Google quail bird dog art, every picture's got broom sedge, one of the little blue stems, the andropogons, the schizocariums, they go by different names these days. But broom sedge was basically where we found these things. So we got rid of it so it had better pasture for the cows. And now we're paying $127 a pound to put it back. It's very good for golf, roughs, and people are putting it back into their fields to bring the wildlife back. So in my lifetime, I watched this plant go. Context, right? Context from it being a terrible weed we had to get rid of to now let's pay a lot of money to put it back. My credentials, I said, I'm proud of my book learning. I started reading actually when I was 2 because I had a sister 4 years older who taught me school every day when she got home from school. So I've been reading ever since, and of course my parents said as much education as you will get, we will help, we will pay for it. So I'm proud of that, I truly am. But it isn't really that makes a person educated. And this old grizzled man who was a representative of a nurseryman I paid a call on when I first started my job. I'm a young horticulture professional, university specialist, And I walk out to his field and say, well, what can I do for you, sir, to make you smarter, better, more productive? Yeah. And he said, and I'll have to let you imagine the last word since we have children in the audience, but he said, without even looking up, you people who got all your learning from books don't know which favorite word in there. And I said, you know, sir, you're right. I agree with you 100%. But I grew up on a dairy farm. I worked in a garden center. I propagated plants. I put in all our irrigation. I said I waited on people. I grew plants for the garden center. I can drive a tractor. I can back up a trailer. I can attach implements. He finally met my gaze. It was like, okay, well, maybe you are a real human being, not just a book learning people. And there's my mom and my baby sister. She has gotten in this picture yet another reading specialist degree. And may I tell you, my sister taught public school in Mississippi for 30 years. She now teaches adults with reading disabilities at Mississippi State part-time after she retired. She's a hero. And I can't help but choke up. That's my baby sister, y'all. And this is the way I grew up. My mama ran our farm. My daddy had his own business. She was the one who said, I want this farm. Daddy said, you can't buy that farm without buying 700 acres and 300 Holstein cows. And she said, I'll run it. And he, being the least chauvinist man I've ever met, believed her, and she did. So this was my mama, and that was me. I got Diamond when I was 10, and I rode everywhere and just picked up stuff and brought it home. By the way, do not gallop home with ripe persimmons in your pocket.
Yes.
But this is what I've always done. All my life, I've disappeared into the woods. I just do. You know, I hear something I don't know. I see a flicker of a bird. I wander. I go. I look. I ramble. It's just a lifelong passion wherever I've lived. And y'all, I've lived in some hovels in West Tennessee because I've always had dogs. And nobody wants to rent a nice house to somebody with a bunch of mutts. So some of the places I've lived in would qualify as hovels. That's all I can say. So this is that was the land in Island Creek, Island Road. This is the land I live on now. I finally bought after renting cheap hovels all my life. 10 years ago, I built a house out here on 117 acres for dogs. Dog mudroom, built-in dog doors, a pine way off the road. So nobody could tell me I couldn't bring home another stray dog, right? So this is us wandering around, and the land was cheap because it had been logged. That's how I got the land so cheap. There was still some mature forests where the valleys were too steep for them to actually log. That was one reason the land was so cheap, y'all. It was sorry farmland. It had never been farmed. And for that reason, I have found on my land in West Tennessee, yellow lady slipper orchids, maidenhair ferns, lots of smooth hydrangeas, support gentian, and a little frog I didn't know existed. The toad, gosh, what's the one with the orgy breeding, Mike? He sounds like they're stomping on a spadefoot. Spadefoot toads live underground all their lives. Did y'all know they existed? Well, my land's never been tilled. So the first time we had a big rain, you have to have 7 inches of rain, they come above ground and have orgy breeding. And they sound like you're beating up blue herons. They go, and they have babies so fast that the tadpoles actually eat each other till the few that mature work, but they only will lay eggs in ephemeral puddles. That's why they didn't know they existed until I bought this land, because it had never been farmed, right? All right. Here we are wandering around. I've lived in wetlands, I've lived in uplands, I've looked at everything through the years. That's Niblet, she's still alive, 16, sleeping with me every night. I know where the native blueberries are to be found and when they bloom in the spring, and that the Cecropia moth cocoons live off the sweet gums that people love to hate so much. There he is, hatching out. Isn't he gorgeous? He's a he. See his big male feathery antennas. So all these things I've discovered from wandering and looking and thinking and seeing what critters use. So I'm going to tell you that I'm qualified because my academia is balanced by my real life experiences and my own 2 eyes. Okay, we know not to trust just our 2 eyes, right? That's anecdotal. But when your own 2 eyes tell you that something you've read in a research journal or a book is wrong, then you do more investigation. And then you find other people that have evidence for what you have also noticed.
That's everything that gets me confused, is I read something, and, well, first I usually ask somebody I know, and they'll say this. Then I'll go read my book, and it will say
It is very confusing. What you need to do is learn to research several trusted sources. Never trust one single source. So, yeah,
I usually do 3, but I should do more.
Yeah, and just, again, your own eyes. Sometimes you unlearn, sometimes you relearn, some things are true. Like a lot of people will tell me, yeah, this snake away works because I put it down and I didn't see snakes again. How do they know that it was a really great family of hawks that moved into the area that really liked snakes? You know, so there's a lot of things it could be. There's my snake killing dog over y'all. I could not train her not to kill snakes. All right, and we know not to trust the internet. We know what's going to pop up first are the ones that have been paid more to pop up first. So we have to learn how to sort through all this. And I think, y'all, I hope all of you are on board with this. We need to start addressing this at grade school. How to do research and how to do critical thinking so that people don't believe just whatever is sent to them or what they run up on the internet. So I'm going to tell you that academic research is not the end-all be-all, because also in my time in academia, I have seen where people slant their research, where they exclude factors that would have affected the research and made it come out a different way, where they send it for review to their best buddies that agree with them. And now there are whole journals on how journal research can be slanted. Yes, it's sad. So, I'm going to go on through this because I'm going to run too long if I do. I want to talk for just a minute, though, about Darwin, because one of the things I've learned from observing, and I love Charles Darwin's story. Anybody read The Voyage of the Beagle? Because it's actually a great adventure story. It's not boring at all. At the age of 22, he was employed as a naturalist on a 5-year voyage, going around the world. And the reason he came up with the idea of taking in the whole picture was because he was well schooled, not just in one subject. These days, what do? We take a kid and say, you're good at math. We're going to put you in engineering school. All your courses are going to be focused on making you a successful engineer. Whereas if you have a broad, encompassing education to start off with, you start to put things together over the big picture. It's so necessary. It's so important. Let's try to change our education system so that we do this. All right, so back to the, that's okay. You get a little bit ahead of me sometimes. By the way, one of the things he did so well was observe. So I'm going to tell you that an observation of your own is a very important component of education. All right, now thank you. So we're going to go through now these very specific things about native plants and examine them for factual. You can't find native plants at local garden centers? When they tell me that, I realize they don't know native plants, do they? Have you ever gone into a garden center and not seen phlox, black-eyed Susan, scara, hardy perennial hibiscus, coreopsis, or coneflowers? They're native, right? Most of our, 60% of our plants is what somebody estimated in garden centers are natives, or native derived. All right, next one. All these, by the way, I highlighted these. The ones in brown I naturally have occurring on my land. The ones in yellow I planted, native hater that I am. And the ones that are in blue are both. They naturally occur on my land, and I planted some to have closer to the house so that I could enjoy them. In the woody plant realm, you ever walk into a garden center and not found a smooth hydrangea or a magnolia or a redbud or a dogwood or a red maple? And all these, once again, these are all things I could find in local garden centers. I've never shopped at a pure native garden center. I always buy the garden centers that I know and embrace and run across. So all these plants I found at local garden centers. Okay. But you're going to say, or the native purists would, they're cultivars. Man-made Frankenstein things. Some guy in a lab put them together and they are not beneficial. That is not true. Most of our cultivars were naturally occurring seedlings. This is what happens. Genetic variation, that's how evolution works, right? Seedlings occur and the better adapted succeed. And so, golly, forgive the poor nurseryman who said, that's a better shade of pink. Or that one started blooming earlier. That one's more vigorous and actually extends the whole bloom season longer. So that's what happens. Occasionally, yes, there's some breeding. Occasionally, yes. Is that always a terrible thing? Because I always imagine somebody typing me out a hate mail and they're crunching on a carrot. Right? Somebody put that breeding together to make that nutritious carrot that they're crunching on. So we can create, by deliberate selection and breeding, more productive plants that require less input, that reduce water and pesticide use, that can reduce worldwide hunger and enhance human health. One of our favorite people is an Iranian woman in Jackson who works at the experiment station where I just retired, who's working on drought-tolerant plants, y'all.
Oh, good.
She left Iran so that she could be all that she could be, which is a great scientist trying to end world hunger. She ended up with an experiment that was 5th in line to get to go on the space shuttle. Aren't you grateful for human beings like that exist? So yeah, that's what we're doing. Is that bad if it's man-made? We're trying to do good with a lot of this. I couldn't do without my sweet tango apples. Who's a Honeycrisp fan? Honeycrisp is a mama. Says everything. Honeycrisp has a lot of good babies, y'all. Anytime they cross up with the Honeycrisp, you come out with these really great apples. Sweet Tango, Evercrisp, Coffee Crisp, Wild Crisp, Sugar Bee, and Lewd Crisp. Now let me talk about this for just a minute. Some of those were deliberate crosses. Somebody took a paintbrush and they took pollen from one tree and they took it over to Honeycrisp and did a deliberate cross. But a couple of these occurred naturally. A honeybee did it. So are those somehow, those are good, but the one the human did bad? I mean, that's kind of what they're implying, isn't it? If a bee did it, it's okay. But if a human transferred that pollen, that's man-made. Bad, man-made is bad. Some cultivars can be less useful. I admit, double flowers, I don't really care for them anyway. They will obstruct access. But other times they may be just longer blooming, more resistant to disease, more tolerant to drought and heat. Don't we need that right now? So I don't want this one. I do plant for wildlife. This may be cute and pretty, but I like to watch the insects feed on the coneflowers, so this is not one I would select. Now, Mount Cuba has actually done a study, just concluded this past year, on the coneflower cultivars to see what the insects preferred. Guess what, y'all? Cultivar came out on top. Fragrant Angel. Number 2 was just straight species, but then there were about 8 more cultivars that were right up there in the straight same ranking, almost identical to straight species coneflowers. That's Mount Cuba. That's a native plant devoted garden. So what I'm saying is a cultivar might even be better than straight species, and they prove that it will be. So you can't make a general statement. You have to evaluate each cultivar on its own merits, which we're supposed to be doing anyway about human beings, right? Otherwise, we're just, put everybody together in the same big lump. All right, this is actual study does. I just ate supper before we got here. I got a sip of water too. All right, this is actually Tallamy's study. He wanted to show that these strange cultivars were bad, that if they had different colored foliage or they were an odd growth habit, or they weren't as good for the insects, y'all, and he couldn't. The only thing he found out was there was a little bit of the insects did not prefer the ones that had darker burgundy leaves. Everything else, there was no difference. So his investigation showed that only the ones of anthocyanin enriched leaves, in other words, purple, reduced insect herbivory. That was the only one. Otherwise, it made no difference. All right, so this is what he said, though, in a recent interview, even though his own research showed differently. He said it's a bad idea to load the landscape with plants that have no genetic variability. Gardeners ought to have access to straight species. We have to convince the nursery industry that native plants are about more than just looks. Is that not a bit insulting? If I were a native plant breeder, if I were a breeder of plants, pretty only, we select for a lot of things: disease resistance, vigor, less sensitive to soil variability, more tolerant to our heat and drought. Go ahead. And what's wrong with pretty? I will tell you that pretty is not just shallow. Pretty is in our DNA. Pretty, you tell that peacock, he's not saying, "Hey, baby, get a load of these chromosomes." Bowerbirds decorate their thing. Pretty is actually part of what is in our DNA. You can call it shallow if you want, but Mother Nature will tell you differently. Here's the Echinacea study. We can go on. By the way, he's a great speaker. Anybody looking for good speakers, this is a fantastic program. I heard him up at the Cincinnati Zoo last year. I could have told them that because we were doing some echinacea trials at the station, and we noticed that some of the butterflies definitely preferred some of the cultivars. The skippers in particular love this yellow cultivar. So this is my native honeysuckle, major wheeler, which is a rebloomer. So its only difference from species that continues to bloom all season, right? Anytime it throws down and give it a good drink, it blooms again. So how is that bad?
So major wheeler is a native?
Oh yeah, it's native. It's for honeysuckle. So this reciprivira, and so is black sandman, Alabama crimson. They're all rebloomers. They just rebloom. That's the only difference. Naturally occurring, found in nature. All right, here we go. Native plants are easier to grow, more drought tolerant, and pest resistant. Is that true? How many of y'all killed a dogwood? That's one hard little native booger to grow, isn't it? Pussas are much easier from China. They've actually been crossbreeding some pussas with some natives to get some that are easier to grow. So here's some difficult natives I've had real trouble with trying to grow sourwood. I had to finally buy land where it already grew. Dogwoods, the mountain stewartia, there you go, mountains. Rhododendrons, Calmia, mountain ash, pin oak. Pin oak's the most removed tree now in the Tennessee landscape because of its susceptibility to bacterial leaf scorch, and there's many more. How many of you have driven past an old place in the country where the house is gone and the forsythia still blooms? So how easy is that exotic? How easy are these old magnolias that Plato, I always remember Plato saying to a guy, this is what he recommended for a tough spot, and this guy said, I don't know, Plato, that tree always blooms so early in spring that it gets frosted. And Plato said, well, you get a small, beautiful tree that's going to grow anywhere you plant it, and some years you get to enjoy the blooms. And I thought, that's so wise, so typical of Plato. How many of you have grandma's peony or hydrangea? You know? So these are exotics, y'all. You might think the white oak in my driveway was more drought tolerant because it just grows along every year doing its thing without anybody adding any supplemental water. But here's why I'm telling you it thrives and why all those other trees out in my woods are thriving is because we haven't messed up the soil. Soil naturally occurs in layers. Soil naturally has channels. Even our terrible clay soil. Drive down a country road and tell all those trees out in the woods they're growing in terrible clay soil. Clay soil has natural channels. It has naturally aggregated clumps that allow percolation, that allow the soil to breathe. When we beat it to death with a tiller, we pulverize it into powder and we ruin the soil texture that it naturally accumulated over decades on its own. So remember that. No-till state, do no-till gardening. Now, if you want that wild hollering junk, like, at the station, we have our annual trials. Then, heck yeah, Jason tills the heck out of it, adds all the extra material, throws the fertilizer to it, because we need quick results, because we're doing annual trials. We've got a field day to put on. But in your own garden, you're not going to get the wild, quick hollering junk. Are you going to have to water as much? No, you will not. Here's another reason why. So when we pulverize that soil, it's going to settle down, it's going to sift down to all that clay to this layer. And then your roots are not going to go down here where you have the natural cracks. Anybody remember a term from soil science called PEDs? PEDs are big columns in clay soil that form over time that allow fractures to go deep into the earth. So this is what we're messing up. We have created a layer where the roots cannot penetrate down into that good clay soil that holds water and has good nutrients. That's why the ones in the wild do better, not because they're native. Here, it's not me saying this. Look this up. This is Kentucky, the Soil Conservation Service. Go ahead. Are exotics really bad?
No.
I don't know. I don't think so. You took it off the screen before I was through. We were all enjoying that, were we? No. Except for No Country for Old Men, where they gave him that horrible hair.
Oh,
Such a killer. But exotics aren't always bad. We're gonna dig into that more deeply. Yeah, there's some bad actors out there. Don't we wish we could wave a wand and get rid of privet and buckthorn and kudzu and all that kind of stuff? Sure we do. But even Then, again, context, if we have an apocalypse, y'all need to go find a kudzu vine. You can eat it, you can make, the big roots are starchy, you can live off them a long time, you can weave clothes out of them. There's a lot of good things. You can make jelly from the flowers, there's a lot of things you can do. But yeah. Okay, here's some natives that I will never ever put in my garden again. Cup plant, oh my gosh, what a big beautiful prairie plant. And so were the 20 more I had next year. And then the 200 after that. And to dig that up the root system on that thing, I had to hire young men to help me. It was unbelievable. That Leuciniata, that Rebecca Leuciniata. I don't mind red star hibiscus because I dig them up and give them to friends. I love that. And it does reseed like crazy. River oaks, red maples come up everywhere. Virginia creeper, Lord knows the birds spread it around. The greenbriers, please, can something come along that attacks greenbriers? I have lost more blood to greenbriers than I think anything else.
You can eat them.
All right, go ahead. So what is a weed? A plant having to deal with an unhappy human, a plant whose virtues have to be discovered, or a plant whose virtues need to be remembered. Let's talk about this weed.
Oh, I love that one.
I do too.
I make pesto with it all the time.
It's a very good edible. It is a European invasive, according to native purists. And one thing that really got me speaking on this, thinking about this, I was at a conference up in Asheville, North Carolina. There was a man there named Dr. David Kozo, and he was the Cherokee Nation ethnobotanist. He was to keep them in touch with their native plants, with the plants they had used. So he showed the nutritional value of some of these plants we think are weeds that we pull up to plant spinach. And one of them he showed were the henbits and dead nettles. And I said, well, wait. I went up to him and said, David, those are European invasives that were brought over by Europeans. He said, sure they were. He said, but the Native Americans knew a good thing when they saw it. So they adapted quickly, which is true of our wildlife too.
We make teas out of them.
They make tea, and here's the thing, the bees are on this. Look at our fields. What is going on in that field in early spring before they plant the crops? Here is a swath of flowers for our pollinators. Not to mention, why is it called henbit? Why is it called chickweed? Throw it over into your hens. They love it. They eat the heck out of it. And not just, okay, hens aren't wildlife, right? They're domestic birds. How many times have I seen wild turkey out in those fields? Eating that henbit, eating that chickweed. They love it. So here's a beneficial invasive weed. So context, in today's disturbed ecosystem, with the way we farm, is this invasive European weed an asset? I say it is. Okay. Oh, who is profiting? Yeah, when we talk about henbit being a weed, who's convinced us henbit's a weed?
Pesticide.
Pesticide, herbicide, people who sell herbicides, lawn companies, all those people making a bunch of money.
Monsanto.
Think about how many engines are running, spraying for henbit, putting down pre-emerge for henbit, all the huge impact on the planet, the carbon footprint of getting rid of a plant that at this point in time is beneficial. Our lawn's bad. That one probably wouldn't support a lot of wildlife, but I don't care if you want to keep your lawn to golf course standards. That's one thing. If you're a golfer, you certainly want something like this. But this is more like my lawn, right? And here's where the dandelions.
That's our lawn.
Yeah, it's a mixed population. It's a very diverse lawn. So the dandelions, of course, bloom early. They were brought over. They're a European weed. Go ahead. They supply flowers for the insects, and then the seeds for the little indigo buntings. My sister even saw a painted bunting eating dandelion seeds. Is it quick?
Yes. Our neighbor right down the street who's never lived there, hardly, it had dandelions and wildlife everywhere. Until the workers came and destroyed all of it and cut down the tree.
Happens way too much, doesn't it?
Dandelions is good to eat.
All right, so all these birds, y'all, if you start reading avian studies, these birds have profited because of the American law. They have prospered. Especially the bluebird, which will not nest unless it's in open meadow, grassland. Does not like anything brushy around its feet. All these birds have increased in population. So if you read avian studies, we've got lawn adapters, we've got lawn avoiders, and then we've got lawn exploiters. But the truth is, most bird diversity is now found in suburbia. worldwide. Not in the country, not in the city, of course, but in suburbia. Why? Because suburbia most imitates the patchwork farms of old. A lot of borders, right? Fence lines, different types of population, a lot of diversity of plant material. That's what suburbia has now. And that is, I will send you the links. You don't have to believe anything I say. I will send you the research of the avian studies. Go ahead. I know it's going to be long. Okay, this was so funny. This lady jumped on me because I said dandelions were good for bees. It was actually a honeybee conference. She said, you know, they really should be pollinating plants in the wild that are more nutritious. And I said, excuse me, you're complaining to me about a European insect feeding on a European weed, and am I forcing it to feed only on that dandelion? Have I got a little cage around it that says you can only have dandelions? I mean, if it wants to go out in the woods and eat those more nutritious flowers, it's fine. She didn't have a comeback. So go ahead, let's get on to this. All right, so here, if you want to decide, do I want the lawn care to treat my thing? Here's all the pros. You'll have flowers, you'll have all this, you'll reduce the chemical use and the reduce carbon footprint. Here, we're going to have to find a lawn care company something else to do, y'all. And aren't we going to be sad when those petroleum companies aren't making so much money? All right, when aggressive can be good. Everybody thinks that plant's aggressive because we see it on the roadsides all the time, right? What do we do to the roadsides? We're constantly disturbing. It's where we disturb the soil. That's where they move in, anchoring our soil, providing sustenance for wildlife. So mimosa gets a bad rap, right? You see it all the time. And it does reseed. It can be a weedy thing. But dang, when I'm riding down the road and it's fescue, which is terrible for wildlife on the roadside, and then there's a mimosa tree blooming on the fence, and then past that there's nothing but cotton. What in that scenario is doing some good? It's a nitrogen fixer. It's light shade. It doesn't crowd out other plants. If you let the field go back into natural succession, it's short-lived. It won't live. The taller trees, the native trees, will crowd it out. Go ahead. All right, sumac. Let's talk about aggressive. This is a great native, and I am wild about these natives and things I wish we would get over. We'll talk about some of my favorite natives I think we should plant more. The sumacs, of course, are our #1 food for our eastern bluebirds. They don't have insects in winter. This is what they live off of. A lot of other birds do as well. Somehow this is a little bit out of order, but Japanese honeysuckle, go back for just a minute. Oh, I know what it is. Okay. Talking about birds that succeed because of what we plant. All right, this is Dr. David Pitts. Go back one more for me, please. There, honeysuckle, he discovered, was their #2 food to live on in the winter. The Japanese invasive honeysuckle we've been taught to hate. He also did studies on the nutritional level and found that the honeysuckle berries are 10 times more nutritious than the sumac. All right, so this last winter before last, go ahead now. When I found in my bluebird house these dead frozen bluebirds. Dr. Pitts did that study, by the way, studying their scat. So when I took the birds out and I studied their scat, I found lots of sumac berries. I almost wish I'd found honeysuckle berries, right? Would Japanese honeysuckle have saved my bluebirds? Is Japanese honeysuckle that big a thug that it's actually destroying habitat, or is it at this point adding? I'm just asking these questions. So I know I like that picture because I always love when birds do their thing on green stuff. And here it is that Japanese honeysuckle is only found in successional status. This is, again, research that I can send you. We don't have time to go through it all there. I do love talking about scat. Jason always got on to me because it seemed like every lunch break, that's what I ended up talking about. I said, it's a science called scatology. You learn a lot by looking at what animals eat. And we're going to refer back to this in just a minute. I can tell when the pawpaws are ripe, right? By stopping on the road and finding the pawpaw seeds or the persimmon seeds when they start to ripen by looking at the scat. And don't do this. Don't cut persimmon seeds in half. It depends on where you cut it. Whether it's going to look like a knife, a fork, or a spoon. It does not predict the winter. And if you were cutting through hard persimmon seeds with a sharp knife, your mama didn't teach you right. That was dumb. All right, let's go deeper into this. Then we'll eat native plants. Go ahead. We know this theory. There we are with the. All right, here's a plant. This is, of course, taken right here in Memphis. This is a native plant. There are no insects eat the foliage. That's what he doesn't like about butterfly bush. This is an east tree, Elysium parviflorum, one of my favorite plants to recommend for a screen. Because it's going to grow in sun or shade or wet or dry. Makes a nice big glossy, perfectly immaculate plant. You know why? Because insects won't eat it because it's toxic. The leaves are each one perfectly intact. Because, well, here's a native plant that insects can't eat. So tell me, should we get rid of it? Should we take it out of our nurseries? Should we condemn people for planting it? Because that's what they said was so bad about butterfly bush. Whereas butterfly bush is going to do this for me all season. We have sterile forms of it now as well. And it's going to do the same other things that any plant does. Because all plants provide some good. They provide cover. They anchor soil. They make oxygen that we breathe. So all plants don't have to be all things. All right. Doug Talley did finally say this. There's just a core genera of native plants that support insects. A mere 5% of the native plant genera in any North American ecosystem support most of the caterpillars, again as pets, the caterpillars. But you don't hear that, do you? You don't hear that trumpeted out like the rest of the information that gets. All right, let's go on. There we are on apples. These are all, those are non-native plants that native insects will eat. Go ahead. Oh, even lawns, y'all, that get such a bad reputation. How many of y'all have watched birds eat armyworms on your lawn? They have sort of come down in flocks for it. So even the so-called no-good turf grass. Go ahead. The Chickadee Study, this is what everybody says, but the Chickadee Study proved that you're going to have fewer birds if you have non-native plants. Y'all examine that Chickadee Study. It was a shameful, really slanted study in that they chose a certain number of plants to be evaluated in a certain little range. These caterpillars declined as populations of non-native plants declined. Did they factor in whether it was a treated lawn? They did not. For all we know, it's a mow and blow landscape where they come down and put insecticides on the lawn grass. That was not considered. Everything in that whole study is, to me, just horrifying to think how few they considered. They slanted the whole thing to be. All right. In highly managed human-dominated environments, non-native plant species are not ecologically equivalent. Did he compare useful non-natives to useless natives? No. He compared useful natives to useless non-natives. Why don't you do the reverse? Why aren't you trying to find that out? Tell us good plants to use. Not what good native plants are there to use. What are the good plants to use? Okay, go ahead. Generalists versus specialists. Here's our little poster child. The monarch that supposedly has to have the native milkweed. Yet I have grown all of these at my house. The verticillata died. I couldn't grow the incarnata. The tuberose I could grow, but it's usually denuded by the time I get monarch caterpillars. It's got aphids on it. It's unhappy. It doesn't have much foliage. So what I've done, even at work, I have carried caterpillars, monarch caterpillars, from the native perennials over to the African species so that they could survive and become monarchs. Good use of government money, right? When I was working. So there they are, feeding happily on that. Plus, here's this plant I can grow from seed. That is an annual. I can sell you a 6-pack of that at the spring plant sale at UT Gardens for $3, a 6-pack. That's going to produce that much foliage, and you can save the seed and do it over and over and over. Now, how many of you have had a few perennial milkweeds and had the caterpillars on them eat all the foliage and gone desperate? I see it on Facebook all the time. My caterpillars are starving. Has anybody got milkweed? I need to go get some of ours. Do this. There's the plant. Now you can see what it's called. It's got some interesting names that I refer to a male. I'll stop there. Here's the important thing. Here's the molecule that we need. This is what makes the monarch caterpillars resistant to predation by birds. They need this, I don't know how to say cardinalides. I'm from Mississippi, I can't pronounce things. Guess what? Find these in milkweeds. Doesn't matter where it's from. Go ahead. If you put those into a blender, would the caterpillar go, tastes fine to me, looks different, but it tastes like the right stuff. Okay, but instead, here's what happened. This is when I got mad. I had to speak up. when all over the country I saw headlines that blasted, "Plan to save monarch butterflies backfires." This was in a magazine called Science. It's not a good science magazine, but be careful. So this is what I saw the New York Times, saw it in the Washington Post, all this kind of stuff about this horrible milkweed. Yet, NABA, the North American Butterfly Association, says tropical milkweed and the injurious effects of well-meaning people when it talks about what a great plant it is for the monarch caterpillars. The study that was done was because it will overwinter in tropical areas of the United States, and there were potentially problems of the OE parasite building up. Not an issue anywhere where it's killed by frost, but they made everybody in the United States feel bad about planting tropical milkweed. I'm a go to the source person. I picked up the phone. I called Dara Satterfield, who did the research. I said, "Is this what you meant when you did that research, that we should not be planting tropical milkweed?" And she said, "Absolutely not. I grow it here in my own Georgia garden for them." This is terrible. Why did they do that? What are the motives? Why would you disparage a plant that would help monarchs? Are you for native plants or are you for monarchs? That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing some kind of agenda here, right? What would be your motivation? If the monarchs need me to say the emperor has no clothes, then I'm going to say it. I don't care if I'm qualified or not. That's just not right. You don't do that. You don't disparage a good plant when there's no reason for it. Tropical, somebody said, well, it wouldn't be tropical if we had drawn the line between Mexico and the United States a little bit lower. And it's really a man-made idea, right? So, the North American Butterfly Association, which holds the national counts every year, is for you planting tropical milkweed. Read this. There it is, feeding happily on it. Here's what Dara Satterfield said recently. "We don't think tropical milkweed itself is bad. Its year-round growth is harmful because it could provoke disease." She said that would be true of any milkweed, native or not. So, made me mad because that's it's a native plant agenda of some sort that makes me mad. There's where I got that information. So, if according to that, if that's logical, y'all need to go home and rip out all your fennel. You need to rip out your dill and your fennel and your parsley, anything that your little caterpillars are feeding on, because apparently it has to be native. Are people building careers and funding on native-only agenda? You know they are, right? All right. I plant several things that aren't native for my butterflies. This, by the way, is one of my favorites. This is a pipevine swallowtail. This is a pipevine from South America, Aristolochia fimbriata. I watched this butterfly fly across our parking lot on a windy day, land on our South American pipevine, and look, y'all, caught her laying her eggs. It was not a great photograph, but still, she was very grateful to find that South American exotic in our parking lot. And there are the caterpillars. There they are. By the way, we've also known that it has benefited a lot of creatures around the world. Introduced plants have. The Galapagos tortoises have benefited from the introduction of non-native plants. So, let's say we're going to do native only. What have we already seen to go under that's native? Chestnuts? American elms almost. They're kind of making a comeback. We've got some. How many of you now know how many red maples have flat-headed apple borer? Drive through any parking lot in any city and look at all the sick red maples and go look at the bark. Why? Because we planted too many red maples. If they say we need to stick to a native agenda, we're limiting the plant palette, and what we do there is we have set it up for insects and diseases to adapt to what is most plentiful. To avoid that, we need the most diversity possible. Street tree plantings need to be a huge, diverse range of plants so that we are not setting up a scenario that makes disease run rampant. So it's dangerous, I'm saying, to limit our selection. So here are my reasons. Quick cover for scarred land. It's going to help protect our precious soil. If you haven't seen Kiss the Earth, do. Many are adapted to our harsh urban conditions, where many natives are not. Provide sustenance and cover for wildlife. Sure they do. The broadened plant palette is going to help us avoid catastrophic plant loss. It celebrates our historical past, and it can assist with this changing environment that we're witnessing these days right around us. Go ahead. Remember when we used to celebrate bringing in a new plant? This is Thomas Jefferson saying, the greatest service is to add a useful plant to its culture. And of course, when people came over here, us terrible, terrible, terrible people came to the Americas with our plants, it's because we didn't know what we could eat here. We had to bring over our plants and animals. We were a species trying to survive, so we came over with our stuff. And if you were getting a space capsule to go live on another planet tomorrow, what you gonna pack? Your plants, your animals, because you don't know what you can eat. Here's the origins of our vegetables. Here's where all our food comes from. And you know why? The North American continent was scoured by glaciers. It was, a lot of things were just wiped out. The richest plant diversity is found over here in Eurasia because the mountain range across there blocked the glaciers. So most of our well-developed civilized foods come from that area, and we brought them with us. Who knows what your native cuisine is? I'm Irish, so is it potatoes? No, potatoes came from South America. But my stomach knows what it can use, and so can insects. And other things we use plants for besides food. You say it's okay if it's food but not other. We use them for medicine, beauty, scent, and spices. Spices and silk sparked the whole era of global commerce. Our country was built on the backs of the Silk Road, go ahead, indigo, tobacco, sadly, sugar, rice, and cotton. Tobacco was the only one of those that were native, but the United States was built on the backs of these plants. Now, Michael Pollan has written this interesting book. Who's read this? He has a very interesting theory, and it may sound strange, but let me elaborate a little. He says we think we manipulate plants for our own use, but he says plants manipulate us. And we spread these species worldwide because they have made themselves so desirable. Now that may sound weird. He uses apple for sweetness, potato for nutrition, tulip for beauty, and cannabis for its hallucinogenic properties. But let's go back here just a second. Why is that scat there? Because that tree made a sweet fruit so that that animal would carry it far away from the parent tree. So we do know plants do that. So it's not so far-fetched if you consider the fact this is how plants operate. This is what they do. All right, those that occur naturally on this continent. I'll hurry through this part. If ginkgo was once here, and we know it was from fossil record, when we planted ginkgo, are we introducing an Asian exotic, or are we restoring a native that was here long ago? Because people leave out time. They're like, oh no, the only important piece of time is the moment the Europeans set foot on this continent. How arrogant is that? How arrogant is that? Remember, we were all once one big continent and began to split. Our earth is always rolling and boiling, right? Our continents are shifting around the earth constantly, bubbling up into volcanoes and earthquakes. We're always on the move. When did the Native Americans get here? Are they native? They walked over the land bridge from Asia.
No, that was,
Long ago,
That was
when
debunked.
Beringia was connecting Alaska. Remember Sarah Palin told us
debunked.
about that, didn't she? And if you look at the Siberian indigenous people and our Native Americans, can you tell the difference? Because we know that's where they came from, and they spread down to Mexico and then across our continent. So everybody got here from somewhere else. It was just who got here first. I don't remember what I was going to say about that. I have to laugh when I think about them coming over, you know, all the animals and plants that came with them in the exchange back then. I like to think about maybe Sitting Bull walking around behind two young white Europeans who are talking about how bad invasive plants are. And he's probably thinking, yeah, pack up you and all your people and go back where you came from too. Y'all the invaders here. Okay, go ahead. We were once separated by ocean. Then the water went away and we remingled. So it's okay if we remingle by land but not by water. So many things confuse me about this idea it has to be from here. Here's what happens, all the things that go on in our world, the scouring of glaciers and earthquakes and what has happened, separation of the continents. And we're moving right now, by the way, 3 inches a year. Our continent as it begins to roll under again. But if you start to move 7 inches a year, you're about to have an earthquake. All right, so native to what? Did you know you only find northern red oak on the north side of a hill? I mean, how native do you need to be? To the east, to Tennessee, to our county, to the north side of a hill? Where do we draw the line? All right, the only thing I know that's constant in the world today is change. We know that. We look, we study. I wish I'd taken more geology. You know, I'm really getting interested now in the history of my planet that I've gotten older. Continuous state of flux. Our only tiny slice of time, we say, is when we got here. So this is what we're saying. Anything that arrived here was here when we arrived is good, and any plant after that's not. That's what they say. And I am sorry, y'all. I am sorry of what we've done to a lot of creatures and crowded them out. Would love to see a Carolina parakeet or a passenger pigeon. It's terrible what happened. But I am glad that we don't walk around and run into, you know, saber-toothed tigers and mastodons. These kids found a mastodon jaw, by the way, down in Mississippi a couple of years ago. Don't you hope they turn out to be paleontologists? So I'm for wild things and common sense. I'm not against natives. I love native plants. I've got tons of native plants in my yard. I've grown different cultivars and types, and I think some should be used more. I think of Plato whenever I see the devil's walking stick, the Aurelia spinosa. There's some good goldenrods out there that we should be using more often. Go ahead, we'll just click through all this real quick and get to my wind up here. Well, those look so weird. Go ahead. All right, here, I'm going to wind up right there. Go back. Y'all remember when you couldn't drive across the southern bottom? Yeah. You had to pour Coca-Cola on your windshield to get, because you couldn't see. There were that many insects. Now it's not like that at all, and it is scary to think about this. They work for free. They take care of so much of our world, and we have to. And we're killing ourselves by killing too many of them. And again, go back to who's making the money. So what E.O. Wilson calls something happened to my slides in that switch over. It's the weirdest thing. E.O. Wilson calls the little things that run the world. And I'm a big fan of E.O. Wilson. If you don't know who he is, look him up. A great naturalist who, it's okay, it's not you, it's something happened in that program. All right, so it's not just for food, it's about a lot of other things that they take care of. Let's look at what this is what he says. I turn to the little things that run the world. What's really the problem, y'all? Is it non-native plants, or is that just the scapegoat? Because let's look in the next few slides at what's going on in our world. Go ahead. And again, it's doing some weird thing. This is what we're seeing today, y'all.
That's the problem.
This is what's going on. Isn't that forsythia? Isn't that butterfly? It's this. And people would rather focus on that than say that we've got to do something about this. This cannot be having the way we farm today. It's just crazy. We can't keep on this way. The truth is, there's just too many folks. You know, the human is so heavily populated now, and the truth is, she's already starting to take care of it, isn't she? Pandemics, our world's on fire. The earth is saying, I can't handle this many human beings. All right, go ahead. Go ahead, everyone's doing this. Here. I hope we're not making more babies here, but it looks like we're not. All right, so let's continue on something weird. I don't really want to go back. I don't want to go back to living on just American native foods. I admit it. I'm selfish enough, and I'm glad I live in America. I'm glad I can walk into a grocery store and buy all those nutritious foods any time of year. I'm glad that I can spend my time doing research and doing fun things like my friend Stephanie Dwyer instead of hunting and gathering all day, right? We're really grateful to live in this day and age where I can build my own house out in the middle of nowhere and take in as many dead stray dogs as I want. I'm not saying we don't have any responsibility. I think we do. I absolutely think we can't help it. And I'm going to go on to say Jane Goodall says that the reason she believes we won't be destructive is she believes humans inherently know that we need other beings to survive. And it is in our nature to love and care for them and for each other. And you see it, even in small children, right? It's instinctive. We can't help ourselves. So I love that about us, and I say let's continue to do all that we can. Let's start integrating it, though, into our schooling. Let's teach our kids about stewardship. Let's teach them critical thinking. We got to start this change somehow. It's not too late already, and frankly, part of me worries that it might be. All right, go ahead. I'm going to finish with that. I know I went too long. I'm sorry until I'm a little bit passionate about it. You see why I need to write a book about it instead of just trying to put it all here into an hour program. But what I want to charge you with is to get people to think about it instead of talking about whether it's native or not native. Let's talk about what you can put in your yard that has the least detrimental impact on the environment. It can be grown with the least input that provides the most benefit for the wildlife. That should be the criteria today, not its country of origin. Thank you. I appreciate it. Any questions?
God, no, please.
Probably all said, no, I want to go home.
I don't even know that. Man, this is great. This is
Well, everyone, that was a really good talk. Do I agree with everything? Nope. But I enjoyed myself and I enjoyed listening. Had some really good information. I hope you've enjoyed this video as well and enjoyed coming along on the little adventure with me and Arlo. Little Arlo Jr. Yes. Me and Junior got to get out and have some fun. I hope this video inspires you to also do more research and look into the plants that you're growing. I don't like Frankenstein foods, but that's other people's opinions. Everyone, take care. It's time to go home. We're tired. I look forward to seeing you in my next video, and may you each be blessed. Everyone, I'll see you soon. Take care.